I found the journal by chance while unpacking in the back bedroom of the rented house. It must have been in the side pocket of my suitcase from weeks earlier, when I had been clearing out a drawer at home and had not paid attention to what went in. The cover was soft from years of being carried and set down. The pages had that faint yellow edge that old paper gets. It fell open to an entry I had written 10 years earlier, when I was 22. The words were short. I had described a family dinner where my mother had spent most of the evening talking about how my older brother always showed up, always made time, always put family first. Then she had turned to me and asked, in front of everyone, why I could never seem to do the same. I had written that I sat there and said nothing. I had written that I stayed quiet because saying anything would have made it worse. I closed the journal and put it in the drawer beside the bed. I did not read any further. My name is Catherine Lawson. I am 32 years old. The winter family stay had been my mother's idea from the start. She had found the large house in the mountains west of Denver, booked it for the week after Christmas, and sent the details to everyone. My father had said it sounded fine. My older brother, Christopher, had said he could take the time. My aunt, Diane Whitaker, had said she would drive up from her place 2 hours away. I had said yes because saying no had started to feel like more work than just going. The house sat on a quiet road with snow on the roof and pine trees close on 3 sides. There were 5 bedrooms, a big kitchen, and a living room with a fireplace that someone had already stacked with wood. My mother had claimed the main bedroom on the first floor. My aunt had taken the room next to it. My older brother had taken the one with the best view of the valley. I had taken the smallest room at the back because it was the one left when I arrived. On the first evening my mother made dinner. She asked my older brother about his work while she cooked. She listened when he talked about a project that was going well. When she turned to me she asked how the drive had been and then went back to stirring the pot. My aunt stood at the counter and laughed at something my mother said about how some people made everything harder than it needed to be. I did not ask what they meant. I set the table instead. The next morning at breakfast my mother mentioned that my older brother had already cleared the snow from the front steps. She said it was good to have someone who thought ahead. My aunt nodded and said some people never seemed to notice what needed doing until it was pointed out. My older brother looked at me and then at his plate. He did not say anything. I drank my coffee and watched the snow fall outside the window. That afternoon my aunt and my mother sat in the living room talking about people from back home. They spoke about who had stayed close to their families and who had moved away and how the ones who moved away always seemed to have reasons that sounded like excuses. I sat on the other side of the room with a book open on my lap. I did not join the conversation. I did not need to. I already knew how it would go if I did. On the 3rd evening my mother cooked again. She had made a roast and vegetables and bread that filled the kitchen with heat. Everyone sat at the long table. My father was at one end. My mother was at the other. My older brother sat to her right. My aunt sat to her left. I sat further down, across from my cousin who had driven in that afternoon with his wife. The fire in the living room crackled behind us. After the plates were mostly empty my mother stood up. She had a glass of wine in her hand. She waited until the talking stopped. I wanted to say something while we are all here, she said. Her voice was steady. It means a lot to have everyone under one roof for a few days. It does not happen often enough. She looked at my older brother first. Christopher has always made time, no matter what else is going on. He shows up. He helps without being asked. That kind of reliability is rare. My older brother nodded once and looked down at his plate. My mother continued. She spoke about my cousin and how he was raising his children to understand what family meant. She spoke about how some people kept traditions alive and others let them fade. Then she turned her head slightly in my direction without looking directly at me. And then there are people who have always chosen to stand a little apart, she said. People who keep their lives separate and then act surprised when the distance feels permanent. It is not that they do not care. It is that they have decided caring takes too much. Some of us have tried for years to close that gap. At a certain point you have to accept that the gap is there because they want it there. The room was quiet. The only sound was the fire in the next room. My aunt let out a short laugh. It was not loud, but it was clear. Well, my aunt said, some people just do not feel the same pull the rest of us do. That has always been the case. You cannot force someone to want what you want for them. My mother nodded as if my aunt had finished a thought she had started. I sat with my hands resting on the edge of the table. I did not move them. I did not look at my mother. I did not look at my aunt. I felt the same cold settle in my chest that I had felt when I read the journal entry 2 nights earlier. It was not new. It was only louder this time because it was happening in front of everyone and because it had been planned to happen this way. I pushed my chair back. The legs made a scraping sound against the floor. I stood up. I did not speak. I walked around the end of the table, past my father who was staring at his plate, and into the living room. I kept walking through the front door and out into the snow without putting on a coat. The air was sharp enough to burn the inside of my nose. The snow on the driveway was packed down from the cars. I kept walking until I reached the road. I did not turn around. I did not hear anyone call after me. The only sound was my own breathing and the soft crunch of snow under my shoes. I walked for another 20 minutes before the cold began to cut through the sweater I had worn to dinner. The road was empty and the snow had started falling again in small, steady flakes. I turned back toward the house but stayed outside for a while longer, standing at the edge of the driveway where the trees blocked most of the light from the windows. When I finally went inside, the table had been cleared. My mother was in the kitchen rinsing plates. She looked up when I came through the door but did not stop what she was doing. "You left without saying anything," she said. Her voice was even, the same tone she had used at the table. I took off my shoes and set them by the door. I heard what was said. My mother turned off the water and dried her hands on a towel. It needed to be said. Everyone has been walking around it for years. You cannot keep treating family like an optional obligation and expect nothing to change. I did not answer. I walked past her into the hallway and went to the back bedroom. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. The journal was still in the drawer where I had left it. I did not open it again that night. The next morning my mother tried again at breakfast. She spoke to the whole table but directed the words at me. "Last night was difficult for everyone," she said. But difficult conversations are sometimes the only way to move forward. Some of us have been carrying this for a long time. My aunt nodded from her place at the counter. It is better to clear the air than to let it fester. That has always been my feeling. My older brother, Christopher, kept his eyes on his plate. My father drank his coffee and said nothing. I ate what was in front of me and did not look up when my mother spoke again. "I am not asking for anything dramatic," my mother continued. "I am asking for some recognition that the rest of us have made choices too. Choices that include showing up even when it is inconvenient." I finished eating and stood. "I understand what you are asking." I left the kitchen and went outside to get more wood for the fire. The air was colder than the day before. I stacked the logs and carried them back in 2 trips. On the second trip I saw a man walking a dog along the road. He raised a hand when he saw me. I nodded once and kept moving. That afternoon I went for a walk alone down the same road. The snow had packed into a narrow path along the shoulder. I had walked for nearly an hour when I heard the dog before I saw the man. He was the same one from the morning. He slowed when he reached me. "You are Catherine," he said. It was not a question. "I am George Sullivan. I live in the cabin 2 properties down. I saw you out here last night after the dinner." I stopped walking. Yes. George Sullivan kept his hands in his coat pockets. His dog sat at his side and watched the trees. I was out with the dog yesterday evening, he said. Your mother and the other woman were on the back porch of the big house. They were talking about what they were going to say at dinner. The one called Diane said it was time to stop letting you act like the rules did not apply to you. Your mother said she was going to make sure everyone heard it so there would be no more pretending. I stood still. The snow fell between us. They used the word cold, George Sullivan continued. They said you had always been that way and that the only way to change it was to say it out loud in front of the others. I did not stay to hear the rest. I came back inside. I looked at the dog. It had snow on its muzzle. There are cameras in the main rooms of the rental house, George Sullivan said. The previous owner put them in for insurance. The rental company left the login information in the welcome book on the kitchen counter. The audio from the living room and kitchen last night before dinner is clear if you want to hear it. They were inside when they finished planning what to say. I did not thank him immediately. I asked if he was certain about what he had heard. I am certain, he said. I have no reason to make it up. He turned the dog around and walked back the way he had come. I stood on the road for several minutes after he was gone. The cold had moved into my hands. I put them in my pockets and started walking toward the house again. When I reached the driveway, I saw my mother standing on the front steps. She had her arms crossed over her chest. You have been out for a long time, she said. I needed air. My mother studied my face. George Sullivan is not someone you need to talk to. He rents that cabin and keeps to himself. He does not know our family. I stepped past her and went inside. The welcome book was on the counter where George Sullivan had said it would be. I opened it and found the page with the security system information. The login was written in neat handwriting. I took the tablet from the charging station and entered the information. The system loaded 4 camera views. I selected the one for the living room and went back to the recording from the evening before. The timestamp showed the conversation had taken place 40 minutes before dinner. My mother's voice came through clearly. My aunt's voice answered. The words matched what George Sullivan had described. I watched the recording once. Then I closed the tablet and set it back on the counter. My mother came into the kitchen a few minutes later. She saw the tablet and the open welcome book. What are you doing? She asked. I looked at her directly. I am listening to what was said before dinner last night. My mother's expression did not change. That is private conversation between family members. It was recorded on the system that belongs to the house, I said. And it was heard by the neighbor who lives 2 properties down. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you are making this into something larger than it is. What was said needed to be said. The way it was said is secondary. I closed the welcome book. The planning was not secondary. My mother turned and left the kitchen. I heard her speak to my aunt in the living room, but I could not make out the words. I stayed in the kitchen until the light outside began to fade. Then I went back to the small bedroom at the end of the hall. I sat on the bed and looked at the drawer where the journal was. I did not open it. I thought about calling Dr. Jennifer Hale, the therapist I had seen a handful of times over the past 2 years. I decided against it for the moment. There was nothing new she could tell me that I did not already know from the recording and from the neighbor's account. That evening my older brother came to the bedroom door. He knocked once and waited. Can I come in? He asked. I told him yes. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He did not sit down. I heard what George Sullivan told you, he said. He came by while you were walking. He said the same thing to me that he said to you. I waited. My older brother looked at the floor for a moment before he spoke again. I did not know they had planned it that way. I thought it was something that came up in the moment. It did not, I said. He nodded. I am not going to tell you what to do. But I wanted you to know that I heard it. He left the room without waiting for an answer. I stayed where I was until the house grew quiet. Then I packed my suitcase. I did not rush. I folded each piece of clothing and placed it inside with care. When the suitcase was full, I set it by the door and turned off the light. I lay on the bed in the dark and listened to the wind against the side of the house. The journal was still in the drawer. I knew I would not read it again before I left. The words in it had already done what they were going to do. I woke before the sun the next morning. The suitcase was already by the door. I showered and dressed without turning on the light in the bathroom. When I came out, the house was still quiet. I made coffee in the kitchen and sat at the counter with the mug between my hands. The tablet with the security system was still on the counter where I had left it. I did not open it again. My mother came into the kitchen a little after 7. She saw the suitcase first. "You are leaving," she said. "Yes." She poured herself coffee and stood across from me. "Running away again will not solve anything. We can talk about this like adults." I set the mug down. I heard the recording. I spoke with the neighbor. There is nothing left to talk about. My mother's face tightened for a moment and then smoothed again. "What you heard was two people who care about this family trying to fix something that has been broken for years. You have always made it impossible to reach you. Last night was an attempt to change that." I stood up and carried the mug to the sink. "I am not interested in being fixed." She followed me with her eyes. "You are making a mistake. The rest of the family will see this as you choosing to walk away from all of us." "I am choosing to stop managing the distance you created," I said. My mother opened her mouth to answer, but my older brother walked into the kitchen then. He had his coat on already. He looked at the suitcase and then at me. "You are going," he said. "Yes." He turned to my mother. "She heard what you and Diane planned. George Sullivan told both of us. I listened to the recording this morning. You stood at that table and said those things because you had already decided to say them. It was not something that came up in the moment." My mother set her mug down harder than she needed to. "This is not your concern, Christopher." "It is," my older brother said. His voice stayed level. "She is my sister. What happened last night was planned in advance and then carried out in front of everyone. I am not going to sit here and pretend it was anything else." The room went quiet. My father appeared in the doorway but did not come all the way in. My aunt stayed in the living room. I could hear her moving around but she did not enter the kitchen. My older brother looked at me. "I am not asking you to stay. I am telling you that I understand why you are leaving. If you need space, you should take it." I nodded once. "Thank you." My mother's voice rose slightly. "You are taking her side without hearing the full story." "I heard enough," my older brother said. "And I saw enough last night." She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply left. That is more than most people would have done. I picked up my suitcase. "I am going now. I will send a message when I am home so no one worries about the roads." My mother did not move to stop me. My older brother stepped aside so I could pass. I walked through the living room without looking at my aunt. The front door closed behind me with a soft click. The drive down the mountain took longer than the drive up had taken. The snow had turned to a light rain by the time I reached the highway. I kept both hands on the wheel and did not turn on the radio. When I reached my apartment in Denver, I carried the suitcase inside and set it by the couch. I sat down on the floor with my back against the wall and stayed there for a long time. At some point the tears came. They were not loud. They were the kind that happen when something that has been held in place for years finally gives way. I did not try to stop them. I let them run until they stopped on their own. Then I stood up, washed my face, and called Dr. Jennifer Hale. I left a message asking for the next available appointment. I did not explain why. 3 days later the family group text went quiet for me. The messages still appeared on other people's phones, but my name had been removed from the thread. No one sent a separate message to tell me about the next gathering. No one asked if I would be coming to the house for my mother's birthday in the spring. The automatic invitations that had always appeared without me having to ask had simply stopped arriving. I did not reach out to ask why. I already knew. In the weeks that followed I went to 3 sessions with Dr. Jennifer Hale. I told her about the journal entry, the dinner, the recording, and the neighbor. She did not tell me I had overreacted. She asked what I wanted the distance to look like now that I had created it. I told her I wanted it to stay. She said that was an answer she could work with. My older brother sent one message 2 weeks after I left the mountain house. It said only that he was thinking about me and that the roads were clear if I ever wanted to visit just him and his wife. I replied that I appreciated it and that I would let him know when I was ready. I have not been ready yet. The lesson I keep returning to is simple. Staying quiet had kept the cycle alive. Every time I had chosen not to speak, not to leave, not to name what was happening, the pattern had room to grow. My mother and my aunt had planned the dinner because they believed I would absorb it the way I had absorbed smaller versions of it for years. They were not prepared for the moment when I did not. I did not fight back at the table. I did not raise my voice in the kitchen the next morning. I simply removed myself from the room and then from the larger pattern. That removal was the only language that made the planning visible to anyone else. My older brother heard it. George Sullivan had already seen it. The recording made it impossible to deny. My mother lost the ability to set the terms of my presence in the family. That loss was not dramatic. It was quiet. It showed up in the absence of texts and the absence of invitations. It showed up in the fact that I no longer had to manage her expectations or my aunt's comments or the weight of being the one who was always slightly outside the circle. I still feel the coldness sometimes. It is not gone. But it no longer controls what I do next. I can sit with it, name it, and then decide to keep walking anyway. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever reached the point where staying quiet no longer felt like the safer choice, drop enough in the comments. I read them.